Picture this. It's a morning in Dar es Salaam, and President Samia Suluhu Hassan stands before a gathering of dignitaries. Her voice is steady, her words are measured. And what she says next is about to send shockwaves through the halls of power in Washington, New Delhi, and Beijing. This partnership, President Hassan declares, represents development and economic cooperation that will lead to strategic partnership between our two countries. My country is expecting that our bilateral ties that were founded by our forefathers, Mwalimu Nyerere and Mahatma Gandhi, will continue decade after decade and continue with strength. To most Americans watching the evening news, these words might sound like standard political talk, the kind of language that gets buried on page 7. But make no mistake, what President Samia Suluhu Hassan just announced is nothing short of a geopolitical earthquake. Because Tanzania, a nation of over 65 million people, strategically positioned on Africa's Indian Ocean coast, blessed with vast natural resources, just signed a $15 billion oil deal with India. And in doing so, President Hassan effectively told the United States, "Thank you for decades of partnership, but we're choosing our own path now." For American policymakers who've grown comfortable being Africa's default partner in energy development, this isn't just a setback, it's a wake-up call. The question everyone in Washington is asking is simple: how did we lose Tanzania? And the even bigger question is this: if we lost Tanzania, who's next? President Samia Suluhu Hassan isn't some revolutionary firebrand or anti-Western ideologue. She's something far more interesting and far more challenging for American interests. She's a pragmatic nationalist who puts Tanzania first, period. Hassan made history in March 2021 when she became Tanzania's first female president. Many in Washington saw her as a potential reformer, someone who might realign Tanzania more closely with Western democratic values. The State Department was cautiously optimistic. American energy companies started making inquiries about Tanzania's untapped oil reserves, but President Hassan had different plans. Plans that didn't necessarily include playing by the rules that have governed U.S.-Africa relations since the Cold War ended. Born in Zanzibar in 1960, Hassan rose through Tanzania's political ranks with diplomatic skill and an unwavering focus on economic development. She doesn't carry the ideological baggage of the Cold War era. She doesn't see the world divided between American and Soviet spheres of influence. President Hassan sees the world as it actually exists today: multipolar, competitive, full of opportunities for nations smart enough to play great powers against each other in pursuit of their own interests. And that's exactly what she just did. "We will partner with anyone who respects our sovereignty and contributes to our development," Hassan said recently to Tanzania's National Assembly. The days when African nations had to choose between predetermined camps are over. We choose Tanzania. We choose our people. We choose our future. Strong words. And backed by $15 billion in Indian investment, they're words that carry serious weight. Now, for Americans unfamiliar with Tanzania, let's establish some context. This isn't some small, landlocked country making noise. Tanzania is a heavyweight. Population exceeding 65 million and growing. A stable democracy that's avoided the coups and chaos plaguing its neighbors. No military coup since independence in 1961. That's remarkable in a region where democracy has been backsliding. Geographically, Tanzania sits at the crossroads of Eastern and Southern Africa with an 800-mile coastline along the Indian Ocean. The port of Dar es Salaam serves not just Tanzania, but landlocked neighbors like Zambia, Malawi, Burundi, Rwanda, and Eastern Congo. Control those shipping lanes and you control access to hundreds of millions of people. Then there are the resources. Natural gas reserves estimated at over 57 trillion cubic feet. Gold, diamonds, tanzanite found nowhere else on Earth, coal, iron ore, nickel, and increasingly, oil. The southern highlands and coastal regions contain commercially viable oil deposits that could transform Tanzania from energy importer to energy exporter within a decade. For years, American and European energy companies had their eyes on these resources. ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, all the major players conducted surveys, filed reports, engaged in preliminary talks. The assumption in Houston and London was simple. When Tanzania was ready to develop these resources at scale, Western companies would get first crack. That assumption just proved catastrophically wrong. President Hassan and her team looked at the Western proposals and found them wanting too many conditions, too much emphasis on environmental standards that would slow development, too many governance reform demands that seemed designed to satisfy Western NGOs rather than benefit Tanzanians. And perhaps most importantly, too much insistence on terms that would leave profits flowing out of Tanzania rather than staying to build schools, hospitals, and roads. "We were offered partnership on paper," one Tanzanian official said, "but subordination in practice." India came to the table with a different offer, and President Hassan was listening. To understand why Tanzania chose India, Americans need to understand India's strategy in Africa. This isn't recent. India has been quietly building influence across Africa for 2 decades. But under Prime Minister Modi, that influence campaign shifted into overdrive. India's approach differs fundamentally from both the American and Chinese models. China offers massive infrastructure loans, often with strings attached, sometimes leaving countries drowning in debt. America offers aid tied to governance reforms, human rights improvements, democratic standards, conditions that, however well-intentioned, can feel paternalistic to African leaders tired of lectures. India offers something different: partnership based on shared post-colonial experience, South-South cooperation, mutual economic benefit. When Indian officials negotiate with Africans, they emphasize that India too struggled under colonial domination. India too had to build from scratch after independence. India too knows what it's like to be condescended to by Western powers. This narrative resonates powerfully. And it's backed by action. India is Africa's 3rd largest trading partner, bilateral trade exceeding $98 billion annually. Indian companies invest heavily in African telecommunications, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, agriculture. Indian technical expertise builds power plants, hospitals, IT infrastructure across the continent. The Indian diaspora in East Africa creates deep commercial and cultural ties dating back over a century. Bollywood films are hugely popular. Indian cuisine influences East African food. These soft power assets matter. When India approached Tanzania about oil development, the pitch was elegant. "We need energy for our economy. You have resources needing development. Let's build together," with terms benefiting both, without political conditions and lectures that come with Western partnerships. The $15 billion deal includes several components, making it particularly attractive from Tanzania's perspective. Infrastructure investment. India committed to building refineries, pipelines, storage facilities entirely within Tanzania, not extracting crude and shipping abroad for processing. Building Tanzania's domestic capacity to refine and use its own resources. The facilities will be owned by a joint venture where Tanzania holds majority equity. Tanzanian engineers learn cutting-edge technology. Tanzanian workers gain high-skilled, high-wage jobs. Tanzania captures more value chain rather than serving as raw material source. Port modernization. Significant upgrades to Dar es Salaam and Mtwara ports, financed partially through Indian credit but remaining Tanzanian assets. Modern ports mean handling larger vessels, processing cargo efficiently, positioning as logistics hub for Eastern and Southern Africa. Economic benefits far beyond oil. Technology transfer. Unlike Western deals keeping proprietary technology guarded, the India-Tanzania agreement includes explicit technology transfer commitments. Indian engineers train Tanzanian counterparts in exploration, drilling, refinery management, petrochemical production. Tanzania isn't just importing expertise, it's building its own. Regional integration. The deal envisions Tanzania becoming energy supplier for East African community. Pipelines to landlocked neighbors. Refined petroleum exports regionally. This positions Tanzania as essential for regional energy security, increasing strategic importance, creating long-term revenue. And perhaps most importantly, from President Hassan's perspective, minimal political conditions. No demands for media freedom reforms. No requirements for NGO access. No environmental assessments, delaying projects for years. Just straightforward commercial terms. We invest this much, we get this return. Tanzania maintains sovereignty over resources and development. For American policymakers, the natural reaction might be dismissiveness. They'll regret this when they realize India is just using them. Wait until problems start, and they come running back. But that reaction misses the point entirely. President Hassan isn't naive. She understands India pursues its own interests. The crucial difference is India's interests and Tanzania's interests align in ways American and Tanzanian interests apparently don't, at least not under Washington's terms. India needs energy to sustain 6 to 7% growth annually, needs to diversify away from Middle Eastern oil where supply disrupts from instability, needs to strengthen Indian Ocean presence to counterbalance Chinese expansion. Tanzania helps India achieve all these objectives. Conversely, Tanzania needs capital to develop resources, needs technology and expertise for modern energy sector, needs infrastructure supporting growth, and needs partners treating it as equal sovereign nation, not junior partner needing guidance. India offered all this. From President Hassan's perspective, this isn't rejecting America or embracing India as perfect partner. It's Tanzania finally having enough options to choose partnerships serving Tanzanian interests best. That's not anti-American, that's sovereignty. What did America just lose? Strategic access. Tanzania's Indian Ocean location gives enormous strategic value. Shipping lanes off Tanzania carry significant global trade, including energy from Middle East to Asia. American naval vessels traditionally enjoyed Tanzanian port access under cooperation agreements. Will that continue as Tanzania deepens India partnership? Probably, but no longer taken for granted. India now has strategic interest in Tanzanian ports, potentially complicating American military planning. Economic opportunity. $15 billion that could have gone to American firms. Thousands of jobs for American engineers, technicians, support staff. Contracts for American equipment manufacturers. Profits for American shareholders. Instead, flowing to Indian companies. Multiply across Africa as more countries make similar choices. We're talking trillions in lost opportunity over coming decades. Diplomatic leverage. For decades, America's position as preferred partner gave Washington significant leverage with African governments. That leverage is evaporating. When Tanzania can credibly say, if you don't offer favorable terms, we'll partner with India instead, America's ability to shape African policy diminishes. This affects everything from counterterrorism to climate change to human rights. The demonstration effect. Perhaps most consequentially, Tanzania's decision tells every African nation you have options. You don't have to accept Washington's terms. You can shop around, play competing powers against each other, prioritize your own interests over historical partnerships or Western pressure. Already, other nations are taking note. Kenya signed major infrastructure deals with China shutting out American firms. Ethiopia turned to UAE and Turkey when American aid came with too many conditions. Nigeria explores energy partnerships with Russia despite American objections. The pattern is clear. African nations increasingly pursue partnerships serving their interests regardless of Washington's feelings. This is what declining hegemony looks like. Not sudden collapse, but gradual erosion of presumptive primacy. America isn't being pushed out by force. It's being outcompeted by rivals offering better terms and fewer conditions. At this point, Americans might wonder, why should I care about an oil deal in Tanzania? I've got problems. Inflation, healthcare, dysfunction in Washington. What happens in East Africa doesn't affect my daily life? Fair question. Honest answer is immediately, this deal won't change anything for average Americans. Gas prices won't spike. Your retirement won't take a hit. Life continues normal. But zoom out, long-term implications become clearer and more concerning. The United States built post-World War II prosperity on global economic integration with America at center. American companies extracted resources from developing countries. American banks financed global trade. American technology dominated emerging markets. American diplomatic influence ensured global economy rules favored American interests. This system, Pax Americana, delivered decades of prosperity. That system is breaking down. Not catastrophically, not overnight, but undeniably. Countries like Tanzania are now powerful enough, confident enough, connected enough to pursue American alternatives. Finding those alternatives in India, China, Turkey, UAE, other rising powers eager to expand influence. For everyday Americans, this shift means several things. Higher costs. As America loses preferential resource and market access, American companies face stiffer competition from Chinese, Indian, other firms. Competition means higher raw material costs, eventually translating to higher consumer prices. The era of America getting first access to world's resources at favorable prices is ending. Fewer jobs. When $15 billion goes to Indian companies instead of American ones, that's American jobs not created. Multiply across dozens of countries, hundreds of projects. We're talking millions of jobs over decades. Engineering, construction, technology, logistics, support jobs that could have been American but went elsewhere. Reduced influence, America's ability shaping global outcomes, climate policy, nuclear non-proliferation, human rights, depends partly on economic leverage. As leverage diminishes, America's voice becomes one among many, rather than dominant voice others must heed. Makes it harder building coalitions against genuine threats, harder enforcing sanctions against rogues, harder promoting American values abroad. National security implications. Energy security is national security. While America achieved energy independence through domestic production, our allies haven't. When Tanzania supplies India instead of American allies, it shifts geopolitical balance. India with secure African energy becomes less reliant on Middle Eastern oil. Good for India, but reduces American leverage over Indian foreign policy. China makes similar African moves, securing resources to continue challenging American primacy. Bottom line, what happens in Tanzania doesn't stay in Tanzania. It's part of larger pattern, reshaping global power over coming decades. If Americans want maintaining prosperity and security we've enjoyed since 1945, we need paying attention to these shifts and adapting. How did American strategy go wrong? How did America, world's largest economy, most powerful military, most extensive diplomatic network, lose to India on major energy deal in a country where we've maintained friendly relations for decades? Answer is complicated but boils down to key failures. The lecture problem. American foreign policy toward Africa, long characterized by paternalism, less charitably, arrogance. When American officials engage Africans, too often, the message is, we know what's best for you. We'll help, but only if you adopt our standards for governance, rights, environment, democracy. Nothing wrong promoting those values. They're genuinely important. But when packaged as non-negotiable conditions for economic partnership, they breed resentment. African leaders hear you're not capable of making decisions. You need us guiding you. India doesn't lecture. China doesn't lecture. They might quietly push favorable terms, use economic leverage for diplomatic support, but don't stand on moral pedestals telling African leaders how running countries. For leaders like President Hassan trying delivering economic growth to citizens, choice between partner who lectures and partner who deals is easy. The strings-attached problem. American development aid and investment often comes with extensive conditions. Environmental assessments delaying projects for years. Labor standards that, while laudable, increase costs. Transparency requirements exposing internal political dynamics. Governance reforms threatening entrenched interests. Again, not bad things in principle. But from Tanzania's perspective, if every American investment comes wrapped in condition layers, slowing projects, constraining sovereignty, while Indian investment comes with straightforward commercial terms, the Indian option looks attractive. The consistency problem. American-Africa engagement has been sporadic, inconsistent. Administrations come with grand initiatives. Power Africa, Prosper Africa, various partnerships. But these initiatives often lack sustained funding, get bogged in bureaucracy, lose political support when domestic priorities change. India and China maintain consistent engagement across administrations. Indian companies invest through boom and bust. Chinese infrastructure continues regardless of Beijing's leadership. African leaders notice this consistency and value partners they can count on long-term. The competition problem. Too long, American policymakers assumed America's position as Africa's partner of choice was secure. Didn't need competing because there was no real competition. European powers hamstrung by colonial history. Russia focused elsewhere. China still developing. That complacency is now being punished. China invested hundreds of billions in African infrastructure. India rapidly expanding economic footprint. Turkey, UAE, others all competing for African partnerships. Meanwhile, American engagement remained relatively static. Kept offering same partnerships on same terms, assuming African nations had no alternatives. Tanzania's decision proves that assumption wrong. President Hassan's decision wasn't impulsive or ideological. It was carefully calculated strategic choice designed maximizing Tanzania's development while maintaining sovereignty and maneuverability. Hassan came to office with clear priorities: accelerate growth, develop infrastructure, create jobs for rapidly growing youth, assert Tanzania's global stage independence. The India deal serves all these simultaneously. By choosing India over United States, Hassan sends several messages to Tanzanians. I'm putting your interests first, regardless of what powerful nations prefer. I'm willing making bold choices if those choices benefit you. To other African leaders, Tanzania is charting its own course. We're not beholden to old partnerships, not serving our interests. You can do same. To India, we're a valuable partner worth investing in. Treat us well, we'll expand this partnership. To China, we're open to partnerships with various powers. If you want competing with India for influence here, make us better offer. To United States, if you want being our partner going forward, you'll need competing on terms actually benefiting Tanzania. Your historical influence doesn't guarantee preferential treatment anymore. It's sophisticated diplomatic signaling. Hassan isn't burning bridges with America. Tanzania still participates in US-led initiatives, accepts American development assistance, maintains security cooperation. But she's making clear Tanzania will pursue its own interests first, and if that means partnering with India, China, others, so be it. The risk is this strategy could backfire. If India deal doesn't deliver promised benefits, Hassan faces domestic criticism for spurning Western partners. If India proves unreliable or exploitative, Tanzania may wish it stuck with traditional partners despite their conditions. If United States decides punishing Tanzania diplomatically or economically for this choice, Hassan's government could face pressure, but Hassan appears willing taking these risks because potential rewards are substantial. If the deal succeeds, if refineries get built, jobs created, infrastructure improves, Tanzania begins exporting refined petroleum, Hassan will have positioned her country for generational prosperity. She'll be remembered as leader who transformed Tanzania from struggling, developing nation into regional economic powerhouse. Tanzania's decision to partner with India is, in microcosm, a preview of what international relations will look like coming decades. Multipolar, competitive, increasingly difficult for any single power, including United States, to dominate. The unipolar moment following Cold War's end is over. American primacy being challenged not through direct confrontation, but through patient, persistent efforts by rising powers building alternative influence centers. India in Africa, China in Latin America and Southeast Asia, Russia in Middle East and parts of Europe, Turkey in Eastern Mediterranean and Central Asia. These aren't isolated incidents. They're a pattern. For Americans accustomed to seeing their country as indispensable nation, this transition is disorienting, often frustrating. Why won't these countries stick with partnership that's worked for decades? Why take risks on untested alternatives? Don't they understand American partnership, for all flaws, delivered more peace and prosperity than any alternative? From American perspective, reasonable questions. But from countries like Tanzania perspective, questions look different. Why should we accept terms prioritizing American interests over ours? Why limit options when we could benefit from competitive offers? Why trust American commitment when it's proven so inconsistent? There are no villains in this story, just nations pursuing interests as they understand them. Let's return where we started. President Samia Suluhu Hassan standing in Dar es Salaam, speaking words reverberating far beyond Tanzania's borders. This partnership represents development and economic cooperation that will lead to strategic partnership between our two countries. My country is expecting that our bilateral ties, founded by our forefathers, Mwalimu Nyerere and Mahatma Gandhi, will continue decade after decade and continue with strength. What sounded like diplomatic boilerplate was actually a declaration of independence. President Hassan was announcing Tanzania will chart its own course, pursue partnerships serving Tanzanian interests, refuse being constrained by historical relationships, no longer delivering maximum benefit. For United States, this should be wake-up call. We're losing ground in Africa not because Africans suddenly became anti-American, but because we've been complacent about competition, too slow adapting to changing circumstances, sometimes too presumptuous about African deference to American preferences. President Hassan just proved that Africa is no longer waiting for permission. Africa is taking its destiny into its own hands. And if America wants maintaining influence, prosperity, security in coming decades, we better start paying attention, because Tanzania won't be the last. This is just the beginning.